Hey, this is Koch with Intro to Computing. Today we're going to be working on photo editing and airbrushing things out of pictures. The whole idea is to do this in a believable way where you wouldn't necessarily think that there was anything that was there to begin with. So this is one of the examples that you could be working from, or one of the images, and here is a kind of after the editing feature. So what I want to do is just work on this one together so you can kind of get an idea of what tools you can use and then some techniques that go along with making a believable photo shot. So to begin with, I'm going to exit out of this just so I can start fresh. I'm going to go to our class folder, and in this folder here labeled 2/18, this is removing evidence of humans and anything man-made. There's 3 levels here. They go up in difficulty. So level 1 is the easiest, level 2 is sort of in the mid-range, and then level 3 is by far the hardest. Just because there's more complicated shapes and things that you have to contend with. For us, I just want to start with level 1. I'm going to download this image by right-clicking and go to download. Then I'm going to go to Photoshop, go to File, and Open. Here's our beach. So before you get into this, number one thing I want to go over is how to edit non-destructively. The first thing how to do that is to always have a copy of the image that you're working on, a pristine, unblemished copy. So what we can do is right-click on this background layer in our layers panel and click on duplicate layer. If you don't find your layers panel anywhere, you can go up to window and you can find really anything in here that you need window-wise. And just to keep this kind of neat and orderly, I'm going to rename some of these layers. So this one, instead of background, I'm going to name this my original source. Everything else is fine. And this one, the background copy, if I just double click on the text there, this is where I can rename it. I'm going to call this my photo removal, or maybe human edit, just anything. And next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hide this original source layer. I just want to keep this kind of on its own thing. Okay, so now I'm ready to edit. Let me go over a few of these tools. These first ones are the spot healing brush, patch tool. Those are sort of the big ones. Then we're also going to look at the clone stamp, and then we're also going to look at this content aware part in our fill. But first of all, let's go over the spot healing brush. This is probably the easiest one to go over. This is just the brush where if you click on an area, that's going to sample the places around it and then give its best estimation of what should be there. Before I get into that, I want to look at what my spot healing brush is like. You can do that up here in the upper left where your options are. You can control the size. You can also even control like the angle and the width of this. Usually I just kind of keep it at a circle, but sometimes you need to change it. Everything else is fine except for this part here at the hardness. Whenever I'm looking at this, it's like got kind of a hard edge. So I'm going to just soften this. Maybe like 30%, that's fine. Okay, so with the spot healing brush, let me just kind of click on this person. Like, the spot healing brush is actually doing a pretty decent job with this. I'm just clicking on these people here and they're literally just kind of going away. Kind of impressed with how well that works. Usually spot healing brush is a little bit kind of off and on. So that one's working pretty well. I'm going to go in my history and I'm going to go back in time here. I can scroll up, and every part of my history here, I'm kind of bringing people back each level. And here I am kind of at the beginning where I first duplicated that layer. I renamed these. Now here I am again. I'm going to use the healing brush tool now. This one's a little bit more unique because, as you can see, whenever I click on this, it says Alt-click to define a source point. So with this, I need to figure out where I want to have my source point from. And that just means like where I want to sample from, like what part of my image do I want the area that I'm clicking on to look like. So first of all, I'm going to resize my brush. One quick way of doing that is right-clicking. I'm going to scale this up to about 40 or 50. Okay, now I need to find a source. This part here seems good, so I'm going to hold down the Alt button. It can be Option on a Mac. And I'm going to click here. And you can see how it changed my brush into this little target. So while I'm holding Alt, I'm going to click. And then now whenever I'm holding this over some of these areas of the people, you can kind of see where it's got that source material attached to it. So I'm going to click on top of them, on top of there. So over here, this person's kind of like surrounded by that wave. So I'm going to try to sample an area in that wave to make it a little bit easier. So I'm going to hold down the Alt button and click on that kind of green part of the wave. And then I'm going to go over that. Okay, I got a little bump part of the wave there. I might Control Z to get rid of that. I'm going to try it again. And one nice thing about this is you can, before I even click, I can line my healing brush tool up with the edge of that wave. So I can be a little bit more consistent with it. Now down here, I'm going to resample an area, let's say here. And I'm going to click that. Okay, it's like they were never there. I'm going to keep what I have so far, and I'm going to move on to the patch tool now. This one's a little bit more unique because with the patch tool, we're going to be circling things that we want to get rid of. So it's kind of like using the lasso selection tool, but we're in the patch tool area. So I'm going to make a selection of this guy. I'm being kind of liberal about how close I am to him because I want to actually sample part of the water too, so the computer knows that I want that in there. Now after I have my marching ants surrounding this guy, I'm going to click and drag this and sample an area that is kind of similar to that. So this part here looks good. I'm going to let go. And there is part of my patch. Now here's the part where some people get confused by. They have these marching ants here, then they can't really do anything else. Whenever you have a selection like that, this is whenever you go to select and then deselect. Then you can start editing other parts of the picture again. Shortcut for that is also Control D or Command D, which is maybe one of the most useful shortcuts that you'll get into. So the patch tool is kind of, it does its thing. It's kind of interesting. Each one of these tools that we've been using, they all have their strengths and weaknesses. You'll use some in some situations and some aren't very good in others. So just kind of testing them out and seeing how they work. Patch tool does a pretty decent job though. Okay, the last tool that I want to go over as far as photo manipulating and getting rid of things is the Content Aware tool. This is something that has been in Photoshop for maybe just the past 5-6 years, and it's really quite powerful. It can be very, very good, but then in some instances it can be pretty iffy. So with this, I'm going to really test it to see if it'll do a good job for me. I'm using my lasso tool, and I'm just like the patch tool, I'm kind of making a selection around the things I want to get rid of, and then I'm going to go up to Edit and Fill. Whenever I'm in this Fill menu, I have several options. If I click the drop-down menu, the one I want is Content Aware. The way Content Aware works is just an algorithm within Photoshop where it takes a look at the picture and then the computer decides what best would fill that space. And like I was saying earlier, sometimes it can be quite awful. One instance I can think of is this cow image that we've worked on in the past, and instead of like getting rid of this cow, it might give this cow 12 legs or something. It's just, that's kind of how the computer works. But we're going to test this out and see how it does. Everything else is fine. I'm going to press OK. Okay, that's actually doing a little better job than I thought. This part here is kind of weird. Here's kind of a strange part here that we want to fix up. This is actually a good time to introduce the clone stamp tool. I forgot to include that. Clone stamp tool is actually the tool that I probably use the most. It feels like can be kind of the most powerful in a way where you have more control over it. It becomes almost like painting in a way. So what I'm going to do is, it works pretty similarly to the healing brush tool. With a clone stamp, you have to find a source that you want to work from. So same thing as before, like with the healing brush, I'm going to hold down the Alt button and find a source area that I want to draw off of. So here looks good. Maybe not there. See that edge that happens? I'm going to find another spot. Let's try here. Okay, now I'm going to click and I'm going to drag. I'm going to go over that little area. Now you can see as I'm clicking and dragging, there's a little plus that's on the left-hand side. It's literally sampling what's on that left-hand side and kind of going with it. So if I continue with this, watch, it will bring in kind of that area that I was trying to go over. There's that little orange spot. I'm going to hit undo. I'm going to go over that little part again. I can better illustrate it here. So let's say I want to sample this part. I'll click that, and then I'm going to get rid of this guy. And then if I keep going, this guy will reappear there. That's because that plus sign is where that guy used to be. So with that, you just want to be careful about where you're getting your source at. This is kind of a problem that you'll see a lot in bad Photoshops. I'm highlighting over two areas here where they are very similar to each other, where that's kind of unbelievable. That wouldn't necessarily happen in nature. So what you want to do is try to break that up. That's the best thing about the clone stamp tool and why I compared it to painting, because you're kind of taking things from several different sources and then kind of making your own new texture. So I'm going to sample this part again over here. I'm going to paint over that part. And now this is kind of feeling a little bit better, but you can see that those two parts there are very similar, so I'm going to try to sample another part just to kind of change it up a little bit more. Okay, so that's looking not too bad. Now what I can do is I'm putting this eyeball back on my original source layer, and I'm going to click my eyeball here just to kind of see how my edits are looking. Whenever I click back and forth, I can kind of get a better idea of like maybe parts that stick out. And a couple of things stick out to me. I wonder if you can see them. I think the first one is right here where that guy is. Whenever I click and unclick, there's kind of a hard edge to where he's at in my edited part. So I'm going to go over that and use my clone stamp tool and try to get rid of that hard edge. Same thing over here, that seems just kind of out of place, so I'm going to try to fix that up slightly. Okay, so that's looking a little better. Anyway, that is a level 1 type image. What I want you to do is go through each one of these and just pick one of each level. You don't have to do all of them. I just want you to pick one from each level and finish it and do the best job you can as far as removing all these man-made structures and humans. Again, this is probably one of the harder ones, and it could very well take you a while, but it's very good practice. Anyway, as always, if you have any questions, send me an email, send me some updates. I'll be more than happy to give you some feedback. One last thing, whenever you save these, I want you to go to File, Save As, and then I want you to save this as a PSD with your last name and first name. And where it says Save as Type, just make sure that's set on a PSD, then press Save. And this part will come up, just press OK, and then you're ready to upload. All right, good luck.